Welcome to Simple Shogi Tactics Episode 6. Had a nice mate in one of my games recently, and so that inspired me to make another one of these Simple Shogi Tactics. I'm going to save the mate for last, but let's look at a couple of middle game examples here to start off with. So this is a game where I have Sente, and I play a fourth file rook opening and set up a Mino castle, and my opponent does something similar. First he maneuvers his bishop out of the way, and then he walks his king over and sets up a kind of Mino castle as well. But the real action starts around here. He pushes his edge pawn and then lifts his lance, and he's going for an edge attack. So this is interesting. I haven't seen too many of these, and I just ignore it for a move, see what happens. I figured that I had sufficient force. If we look at this, he's piling up on this square here with the lance, the bishop, and the rook. But on the other hand, I have a lot of force on that square too. I've got a knight, a lance, and a bishop. So I was thinking that this would be okay for me, and it seems to be okay actually. Let's continue on. I dropped a pawn here to try and scare him off, and he takes. I take with my bishop, he takes, and then I take with the lance. So now I have a lance facing his rook. He drops a pawn here, and I just take it, and then he takes my lance because he lured my lance forward to get it away from being protected by my knight. But then I can just drop a lance again because I won a lance at the beginning of that sequence. And now I have this lance protected by the knight hitting his rook. And the rook has nowhere to run. Anywhere it retreats to, I can take it. And going to the side, this pawn covers this square, and the silver protects this pawn. So there's no good move for the knight. But my opponent found a good move here. In the preceding exchanges, he had gotten a bishop in hand, and he found a nice bishop drop here, which attacks my rook and attacks the lance. So he's trying to recover something. So maybe this is a good point to pause. My next move is a mistake, and see if you can find the better move. Okay, yeah, pause the video if you want time to think about it. I'm going to give the answer away now. I guess first we'll show the mistake. And the mistake was I just moved my rook to the side, attacking his bishop. And the bishop has nowhere to go. All these squares are guarded, and so it has nothing better to do than to sacrifice itself for the lance. But he also wins a knight here, and he promotes his rook to a dragon. So he gave up the bishop for knight and lance, but he has those the knight and lance in hand, and he has that dragon. And in fact, this position is good. That dragon penetrating into my camp was a very annoying feature. I mean, this position was good for my opponent. So let's back up and see what I could have played here. The best move here is actually to move the rook to this square. Put the rook behind the lance, get it away from the bishop. And with an extra defender on this square, it actually changes things quite a bit. The rook is going to be lost if he doesn't take that lance. So that's one point, is that he's going to sacrifice the bishop here anyway. I didn't need to chase the bishop because the rook is a more valuable piece, so he'll probably take with the bishop here. Then I can take with the rook. He can, well, he still has nowhere to retreat to. He can defend it or he can trade, but either way it'll come out about the same. And the difference here is that in exchange for the bishop, he only got a lance. He didn't get a lance plus a knight, so that's one difference. And the second difference is he doesn't have a rook in his camp. In my camp, promoted to a dragon. He doesn't have that promoted rook in my camp that he had in the other case. Now he can drop the rook in my camp. It's his turn, but I'll have a rook in hand and I can drop it in his camp too. And anyway, this continues to be a slightly favorable position for me, mainly because of the material difference. Okay, that's it for this one. Let's take a look at the next example. This is another game where I had Sente, and I was trying out a central rook formation here, which is kind of peculiar. I just seen it in a video. It's some kind of fast attack. I've got the rook on the center file, the fifth file, and then I put the bishop here. So the rook and the bishop are coordinating on this 5c square. It's kind of interesting. There's a defect in this that let's clear those out. There's a defect in this attack that if it's not fast enough, there's counterplay on the rook file here. The bishop is in a vulnerable spot there. So I don't know if I could really recommend this, but I was experimenting with it. I had seen it on a video recently, and I thought it was interesting. I was feeling a little bit stuck first. I mean, the idea seemed to be a rapid attack with the silver, and I had advanced my silver, but then it had gotten pushed back, and so we're at this location. And I was not sure what to do here, and I ended up just pushing a pawn. But when I looked at this later, there was this interesting variation that, sorry, I want to make a branch here. There's this interesting variation where I can actually move this silver forward. I wanted to move the silver forward. I mean, that's part of the idea, is to move these metal pieces up. Probably this gold should go to the side, so the rook will be behind the silver eventually. But immediately I was worried about my opponent just dropping a pawn here, and this just loses the silver, or I retreat, and I haven't really gained anything, and he's dropped a pawn there. But it turns out I can take that. This is what I didn't see, and this is the tactic. So when he takes the pawn, notice that the retreating squares for the silver are covered. So the silver can't retreat, and it can't come forward either. Those squares are covered as well. Everything is covered there. So I can just drop a pawn here and win that silver. And so this nets me a silver in hand, which will be helpful for the attack, and I'll also have an advanced pawn here. So that would be a better sequence than what I played. I just was pushing pawns over on the king side. Okay, let's go on. There was one more example I wanted to show you from the same game. So continuing on in the game, I just work on building my castle, since I didn't see a way to break through in the center. And then my opponent started pushing on the edge. He finally spotted this vulnerability of my bishop there and started breaking through. But I had an idea at this point. I had noticed by this time that this silver, if I could lure it forward, it would be trapped. So I was trying to set that up. And I take this pawn. He takes back. So I'm sacrificing a lance in order to get this pawn drop. Now, I already had one pawn in hand, but I needed a second one to make this work. So if he takes that pawn, then I can drop a pawn here and win the silver. So he ran away. And then I dropped a pawn here because I had another idea. Well, first of all, he's kind of breaking through on my edge, and I wasn't quite sure how the best way to deal with that. And but also I had the idea that if I won that lance, I could drop it here right away and win a silver. So he takes my pawn, and I take his lance. So now I have the lance in hand. He drops a lance. He had a lance in hand. My bishop runs away, and then he comes into my camp with his lance, promoting it to, well, it's a promoted lance now, and it's attacking my knight. So I've given up a knight, and I've allowed him to promote, or I will be giving up a knight, and I've allowed him to promote. But I figure I will be winning a silver in the center, and that should be good for me, and I just dropped that lance right away. So the tactic comes up along a different line, that the Elmo was suggesting that a better move here, let's make a branch. Elmo was suggesting a better move here was just to step aside with the gold, and that unveils the rook along this file here, which is where it wants to be. So that makes a lot of sense. And also the gold over here is a part of the Mino castle. The only reason I didn't play that is I wanted to drop the lance right away to make sure I really got my material back. I was worried that maybe at some point he could drop a pawn here, and then I wouldn't be able to win that silver. So I looked at this variation with Elmo, and it said no, it's no problem. I mean, in real life, my opponent would probably take the knight first, but at some point, I mean that's with tempo because it's hitting my bishop, and then at some point come back and patch that hole. But it turns out this is okay if I play this right. I have to push here first, and then if he takes, then the rook trade is actually good for me because my opponent's castle is weaker than mine, and so I have some good rook drops there. So my opponent wants to avoid the rook trade, maybe taking here with the pawn, and now the tactic is in operation. It starts with this pawn drop here, and this is a point where you can maybe try and guess the move, see if you can find the best move here. Okay, I'm giving the answer away now. It turns out I can just take that silver. It's up for grabs. It's defended, of course. He can take back, but his rook has no moves on the side. That was the point of that little pawn push of 6f to 6e and him taking back with a pawn. It blocked his rook in this direction, so it can't move in that direction. And I have 4 pawns lined up in the other direction, so it can't move that way. So what that means is that I can drop a lance here and win the rook. And then once again, let's see, Elmo's recommending the rook retreats, but then I'll just take it, and then I will have a rook in hand. And as I said before, the rook drop is good for me. So plus I won the silver anyway, which is what I was trying to do. So if we back up, my mistake in this position was being a little too quick to drop that lance, and just moving aside. Just moving aside with the gold there would be a stronger move, and still some slight advantage for me. I mean, my opponent has counterplay over here with his invasion and his attack on my knight there. But anyway, interesting game. So that's it for this one. Let's go on to the mate problems. So let's see, I was Gote in this game, and I've turned the board around, so I'm still at the bottom here. And you can see my opponent has penetrated. He's got a dragon, he's got a promoted silver, and he's threatening to tear apart my king position. But while attacking, he was a little bit slack on his defense. He never bothered to castle, and he let me promote 2 bishops into horses, and so I've got these 2 horses near his king. His king is flanked by a pair of golds and has nowhere to move. In fact, my opponent was winning just a few moves earlier. If he had just been a little bit more defense-minded, he managed to penetrate first, and he would have gone on to win that game if he had taken care of his defense here. Anyway, in this position there is a 3-move tsume, a mate in 2 we would call it in chess, which I didn't find, but I did find in this position, actually later on in the game this similar position recurred. I found a mate in 5, a tsume in 5 or mate in 3, a 5-move tsume. So in these tsume problems, every move has to be with check. So the 5-move tsume, that's 3 moves with check, and the 3-move tsume is 2 moves with check. So if you want to stop and see if you can find either one of those mates, it's my turn to move. Let's see. Okay, yeah. My opponent just took. So it's my turn to move, and I can mate here. Okay, pause the video if you want time to think about it. It's worth seeing if you can find both of them, I think. But first we'll show the simple one. The 2-move, the 3-move tsume. So this is a check. That's the horse checks on the diagonal, and the king has no moves. And my opponent could either drop a piece or move a piece up to block. Doesn't matter. And I have a knight in hand, so I can drop a knight here, and that is checkmate, because whatever piece is put here, it's going to be pinned by the horse. And so the knight delivers the check. The other horse covers the escape square, and these 2 escape squares as well. So that's the simple mate, or the fast mate. the mate I found was not that one, but I thought it was kind of clever. Let's see if I can show that. Yeah. So the move I found to mate in, it's a 3-move or a 5-move tsume. I made it 3. I started with this silver drop here. So once again, it's a check. This line doesn't allow my opponent to drop any pieces. He's got to respond to the check. The king can't take it because the piece is protected by the horse, so it has to be taken with the gold. And then the point of this gold is it blocks the king's escape square. So when my horse takes this gold here, that check, the king can't run away. So that's why it's a forced mate. This horse is guarding this escape square. This gold is blocking this escape square, and then these 2 squares are covered. So the king is forced to take the gold, and then the gold that I just took I can redrop, and that is a mate. Okay, that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. Bye now.